So much of my own carp fishing involves me turning up at venues I've never seen before with very limited time. Okay, I could get a marker rod out and try and explore areas and try and understand what the different substrates are, but a lot of the time that disturbance is just going to spook those fish away. I need a rig that I can cast out there with minimal disturbance, ideally just a single cast, and get that down in amongst some fish. What is that rig? Of course, it's the Chod Rig. The choddy can be fished in a number of ways. It can be fished directly onto the main line, it can be fished on tubing, lead core, leader. It really doesn't matter. It can also be fixed on the line, but me personally, I always opt to fish it sliding, allowing it to travel the full length of the leader, meaning it doesn't matter what I cast over, whether it's very, very soft silt and that lead potentially penetrates into it 1 foot or 2 foot over the top of silkweed, or longer strands of weed. By fishing it sliding all the way along, that pop-up will always sit proud of whatever's on the bottom, meaning in situations where I have very little time to understand truly what's out there, I can be fishing from a single cast. The situation I use the Chod Rig is not over a mix of bait, for example, on a harder spot. It's more often than not fished in conjunction with boilies. I'll cast my bait out into position and then stick out a few baits around it, or potentially use the catapult. Hook bait choice is of course your own personal preference, but more often than not I'm using the citrus. It's a great lure, it's packed full of attraction, and I'm basically utilising it like a sweetie, just putting maybe half a dozen or a dozen citrus bottom baits around it. Those fish will come into the area, they'll see the bait, they'll smell the bait, they'll drop down and they'll take one. They'll then upend and move to the next bait, potentially swimming 1 foot or so off the lake bed bottom before dropping back down and sucking the next bait in. And that's why I need that choddy so critically balanced, so when they do approach my hook bait, they can suck it up with ease and I get a really, really good hook hold. One point to note guys, it's important that the rig has a curve in it. Some anglers fish it with a very, very aggressive C curve, others a much more subtle one. But the most important thing is you have one there, and that's because, of course, those carp can approach that hook bait from 360 degrees. I want that curve in the rig in case the fish do approach it from the wrong side. They'll suck that bait in and the rig will turn around and go in hook point first before spitting it back out and catching somewhere in the bottom lip. Let me run through now exactly how I tie the Chod Rig part itself, and of course the leader that it sits on. To tie the Chod Rig itself, first of all I take a section of chod link. The chod link's a very, very stiff, springy material, so when you take it off the actual spool, you'll notice it will be in very, very tight calls. I need to take some of that springiness out of it, and I just simply put that in between my teeth and using friction, rub it backwards and forwards to kind of straighten it out a little bit. You'll never ever be able to make it truly straight, but you'll notice it has a natural curve to it. I'm going to utilise that natural curve that's already there to create that perfect C shape for my Chod Rig. Next up I take my Chod Twister hook. The twister is a pattern I have so much confidence in, whether that be the standard twister, the twister long shank, or for this particular rig, the Chod Twister with the 20-degree outturned eye. The eyes themselves have been specifically designed to be very, very large, and that's because this particular material here is very, very thick, and I need to create a knotless knot D section, passing that material through the eye 3 times. I then take the tag end and add onto it a plastic bait screw. This is to mount my pop-up on. Nice, quick and simple to use. I pass that tag end back through the eye of the hook, creating the perfect D section, pulling it all the way down tight so there's almost no D there whatsoever. I then take a really cool and useful tool called the Rig Flame Shield, and that's because I've got to take a naked flame now and burn and blob the end of it to completely secure that D section. The length of my choddy is dictated really by what I'm fishing over. If it's low-lying silkweed, I'll go for something around 2 inches in length. If I'm fishing over very, very soft silt, I'll probably up that to 3, maybe even 3.5 inches. And that's because the cling-on leader will start to penetrate down into that silt, pulling the choddy in with it, and I want it to sit at a good couple of inches proud. It's important now that you don't damage the hard work you've done with regards to that perfect C-section of chod link. What I like to do now is take a micro ring swivel, pass it onto the chod link, and then fold over the chod link so it lays parallel with the piece going up to the hook itself. I then simply tie an overhand knot. A lot of people when they see me doing this think, wow, is that really strong enough? Trust me guys, it's super strong. Literally tying a double overhand knot, leaving a small loop there to add some extra movement and hinge into the rig mechanics. It can be fiddly the first few times you do this guys, but like everything in life, practice, 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 and I'm sure you'll get them bang on after a few attempts. The final step of the chod rig is to critically balance it. You can't really do this until you put it in the water and test it on the leader, but it's important to add some form of putty there to ensure it nails itself down onto the lake bed. To do this, I like to very, very carefully take some cling-on putty and roll a small sausage in my hand. I'll then wrap that sausage around the barrel of the swivel, as to not interfere with either of the eyes, making sure I've got maximum rotational movement, ensuring that when that fish approaches from any angle, the rig will flip round and turn and catch. Next up, the leader section. As I mentioned, I absolutely love the Klingon leader, and for the choddy, more often than not, I'm using it in the 45-pound version just because it's more supple, and when those fish drop down to suck the choddy in, it goes into their mouth a lot easier than the stiffer and thicker 65-pound version. I take a long length. This is dictated by the length of rod I'm using, but let's say, for example, I'm using a 9-foot scope, my leader will be around 6 foot in length. I splice into either end of the leader 2 nice loops. Onto one of those loops, I attach a Type 2 link clip. This is then followed up by utilising the components of one of the chod kits. There's 3 in the range, but for this particular setup, I'm using a lead core gripping chod kit. I take the buffer bead and pass that down the length of the leader and over the top of the link clip. Next up, I take the small 2-part component that's usually utilised for fixing the chod rig itself into place, taking the longer section with the spigot on and passing that down the length of the leader, locking it in like a ball and socket joint into the sleeve that's fitted over the top of the link clip. I then take the silicone bungee section with the silicone bead fitted onto the top of it and pass that down the length of the Klingon leader before locking it in place at the bottom of the rig. Next up, the chod rig can be simply slid down. To finish the rig off, I need a top bead. But it's really important here, guys, that you make sure it's absolutely safe. To do this, I thread on a medium tungsten sinker. This is then followed by a tungsten tubing bead. In the event of a crack off, the rig will then easily be able to pass up the length of the leader, pulling the tungsten tubing bead off the back of the leader, ensuring the fish isn't trailing a big long length of leader around. So there you have it. That's how I go about setting up my sliding chod rig. For sure, it's the rig I've probably used most over the last 10 years. Catching me fish from all over the world. To me, that makes it a very special rig, and one you should definitely consider using in your armoury. What a carp. Caught over some real dense blanket weed, just a little citrus pop up, fished on the choddy. So if you're ever in a situation where you're not really entirely sure what's out there, draw for the choddy, guys. It's such a versatile rig for fishing over soft bottoms and weedy lake beds, and for sure you can go away and catch some banging fish like this.